All right, welcome everyone. I hope that you are having an amazing day thus far. You got to hear a student panel. You were able to hear from Heather McGee, and so here you have chosen to come to how superintendents are leading with SEL in mind. Dr. Contreras will be joining us shortly, but we do have Kamar Samuels and Dr. Terrell Hill. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some introductions. I've kind of shortened their bios just a little bit, just to highlight some of the really important points of who they are and the work that they do. So I'm going to start with Dr. Terrell Hill. Dr. Terrell M. Hill is currently the superintendent of Windsor Public Schools in Windsor, Connecticut. He previously served as the assistant superintendent for human resources. Dr. Hill was the founding principal of High School Link, Hartford's Insurance and Finance Academy, which he opened in August of 2009. During his 5 years as principal of High School Link, they received many honors and recognition. Dr. Hill also serves on the alumni trustee of Board of Trustees, serves as the alumni trustee as the Board of Trustees at Westfield State University in Westfield, Mass. He is currently teaching at the MEAG School of Education as an administrative preparation program. His work as an educational leader has been chronicled in books and dissertations, as well as Black Enterprise magazine. Dr. Hill is a graduate of the High School of Commerce in Springfield, Massachusetts. He earned his bachelor's degree in business management from Westfield State College. He earned a master's degree, certificate of advanced graduate study, and a PhD in education policy and leadership from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. His dissertation study looked at the career paths of Black and white superintendents. He is the founding president of Black Leaders and Administrators Consortium, as an organization born out of his research that endeavors to provide career development and support for Black leaders, particularly in the education field. He is also a proud veteran of the United States Army. We welcome Dr. Terrell M. Hill. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Next, I'm going to introduce Kamar Samuels, who is the superintendent of Community District 13, representing Brooklyn, where he supervises 27 principals of schools across several rapidly gentrifying neighborhoods throughout Brooklyn, New York. Kamar is using an anti-racist approach to ensure that schools are creating culturally responsive and sustaining environments for all students. Prior to joining District 13, Kamar served as Deputy Superintendent of Community School District 23 in Brownsville, Brooklyn, New York. Kamar has also held roles in the New York City Department of Education Central Office. There he was the executive director of the District School Design, where he led the Progressive Redesign Opportunity for School Excellence, PROS. PROS enables collaborative schools to engage in the application and voting process to modify certain existing regulations and labor rules for a period of 5 years. He's also led other citywide design initiatives, which included school mergers, school closures, and the opening of new schools. He holds an MS education degree in childhood education from Lehman College, CUNY, and a BBA in accounting from Baruch College. Kamar lives in New York City with his wife, Meg, his son, Joseph, and his daughter, Leah. Did I say that right, Kamar?
Layla.
Layla. So we welcome Kamar to the stage. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. And we have Dr. Sharon Contreras, who is a passionate advocate for providing high quality education to all children. She has spent 30 years dedicating her life to ensuring every student graduates college and career ready and able to fully participate in our democracy. In 2011, Dr. Contreras made history when she became the first woman of color to serve as superintendent of one of the big 5 urban districts in New York State. Dr. Contreras made history again when she was sworn in as the first woman and first Latina superintendent of Guilford County Schools. From the moment she took on her new role, Dr. Contreras has been singularly focused on improving educational outcomes for every single student. She now leads one of the nation's largest school systems with more than 10,000 employees and 73,000 pre-K to 12 students. It is clear across Guilford County, the state of North Carolina, and throughout the nation that Dr. Contreras is on track to meet the goals that she laid out upon acceptance of her role as superintendent. She has championed educational access for all students and academic outcomes to continue to improve under her leadership. Dr. Contreras is widely respected throughout the country for her policy work to end racial disparities in education. Dr. Contreras spent each day cultivating a remarkable legacy ensuring improved life outcomes for all students. That's the only outcome that really matters. And we welcome Dr. Sharon Contreras. So we're going to get her in soon so we get started. So I'll move over to some of our questions, and I'm pulling those up as we speak. But again, gentlemen, thank you for joining us and being with me today. How are you enjoying the symposium thus far?
Loving it. Loving it.
So far, so good. I'm really appreciating the connection that I'm.
Awesome. So to get started, we are currently in a pandemic, and school reopening is happening across the country. So we'll start with you, Dr. Hill. What does it look like for you as a district in terms of incorporating social emotional learning in your reopening process?
Thank you very much. Great question. As I just finished this morning, my district leadership and cabinet meeting. So for me, it's absolutely the foundation of everything we're doing, right? So many people were talking about, oh, we can't wait to get back to normal. I don't want that. I don't think that was productive. I think although we've been living in this pandemic, there are so many things that we've learned about ourselves, shortcomings, namely, that's just my style, to see what I'm not doing well so I can adjust that. So we're looking forward to the entire district, as I shared with folks already, being trained around SEL. We have, pockets of people, but I want the entire district, every staff member, every teacher, every para, my custodians, every single staff member in our district trained in the foundations of SEL, because I'm going to look for every single adult in our district to take part in this work as our students come back. So that's what we're preparing for. I'm looking forward to getting the contract finalized so I can have this incredible organization come in and work with my district.
Thank you so much, and we're excited about that as well. Kamar, how has it been in District 13?
Yeah, thank you. So, look, I think we were in a good position, and we were prepared in a sense around SEL work in our district as before the pandemic hit. I think in a lot of our conversations across the district, we were engaged in restorative practices. We were engaged in a lot of conversation around students' attendance, and so our equity teams were being built out in our schools. But we were getting there, but we weren't there in the way that we needed to be there, right? The pandemic definitely, I think, highlighted many of the disparities across our district. And in District 13, we are either in our neighborhoods are either gentrifying or maturely gentrified, right? And so when we look at the impact school by school, I spend a lot of times obviously in remote classrooms, and you could go from one side of the district. If when we were in person, actually, I'd go from one side of the district to the other, and you would think that my schools were predominantly white, because in person, all of our students were just many of our students that were coming in person were disproportionately white. And so what it meant was that we had to look at our remote structure to ensure that we were beginning to think about some of the SEL pieces in the remote setting, right? And I think because our students were so impacted by the virus, by COVID, and the disparity in who we were connected with was so great. And we've now really begun, and we have really taken advantage of some of the city's resources around. The big one we have is a resource called Bridge to Learn, or Bridges to Learning, which really outlines a lot of really good resources for our schools to tap into. But like Dr. Hill, as we come out of the pandemic, the real core policy has to be that all of our adults in all of our schools have to be trained in not just trauma sensitive environments, but also just trained in ensuring that you're approaching your job and your role with compassion and love towards all of our kids, not just some, but all. And so we're definitely, as you know, Brandon, having different conversations around how to codify and do those things in a systemic way. But our district is fully committed to SEL. As you guys at Urban Assembly say, it's all learning is social and emotional. So.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate you both giving the context there of the work that has to be done to make this happen, and really getting into that adult piece. And so what it made me think about is as we think about that, we have these conversations. What is the best way to ensure that SEL programming honors the cultural foundations of a community? And Kamar, you could start us off.
Yeah, so again, I start in the context of District 13, right, where we have so many, we have such a rich culture. If you think about Bed-Stuy, and if you think about all of our neighborhoods in Brooklyn, and one of the things I like to say is a lot of people, you know, Christopher Wallace is from my district, Biggie Smalls, and one of the things that we have to remember that he says in one of his most famous songs is this song goes out to all the teachers who never thought I'd amount to anything, right? And so that philosophy was really strong throughout our district, and and remains in pockets. So the question then is, how are the adults across all our schools organized to really push first and foremost the love of making sure every single student in your school remains affirmed, remains loved, remains really ready to learn in a way that doesn't re-traumatize them, which I think, by the way, is a potentially dangerous thing with SEL, right? Because SEL, if we think about it, when it's not done well, what it does sometimes is reinforces some of the practices that or some of the behaviors that teachers have towards kids, right? So it becomes like a management tool or something to incentivize good behavior, or something like good behavior, right? Where that's not what we're looking to do. And if you do not have an anti-racist lens to it, that sometimes it can do more harm than good. And so what your question around how do we ensure the cultural norms or that we keep respect for culture, I would say the answer to that is to make sure that you have an anti-racist approach. And for us, we think that a lot of that is an investment in implicit bias training, which is why all of our district is engaged in implicit bias work, right? Or has access to in implicit bias work, because if it starts with the adult and how that adult sees themselves and how that adult then interacts with our kids.
I appreciate that. I have some more questions for you just off that, and when we're going to get to those, because I think it will even build upon what you just mentioned. And so, Dr. Hill, can you mention and I just want to preface. So I'm a graduate of Windsor Public Schools, and so Dr. Hill was my vice principal when I was at Windsor High School. But when I was thinking about what Heather McGee talked about, thinking about this question, it made me think about the beautiful place that Windsor is, right, as a district in terms of its racial demographic makeup. So can you talk about how that looks in Windsor?
So thank you. And Kamar had me all engaged in what he said. I'm sitting there going, well, I'm going to come work with you. No. But no, very much following up on what Kamar said. So, and I also want to touch on my sister Tamara here. So she wrote a nice comment about adult SEL. We are not forgetting adults, Tamara, at all, not at all. But so we've been doing this equity work in Windsor for some years. Even when you were a student here, Brandon, we were doing this work. And what I've done since I've been back in Windsor these last 7 years is as I've pushed the envelope further, right? So we've done the implicit bias work. We continue to do it. But what I'm really doing is getting the adults, starting with my leaders, because everything stems from that leadership, right? We can do all this great stuff, but then as I release people back to their buildings, if they're not really, if they don't own it, I don't want to say buy in, if they don't own it, if it hasn't become part of their spirit, then it dies. it dies on the vine in the buildings. So the equity work that we're doing, and as Kamar said, can't just do SEL the way people will think is like get good behaviors and do all this stuff. I've been expressing to folks that as we do this formal training coming up, but just preparing themselves, getting them to read ahead of time, right? I've even reached out to you for information because I want people preparing themselves like they're going to a college course. I'm a professor. Don't come to my class thinking you're going to start learning the moment you walk in. You need to start reading. I give you assignments long before you ever come to my first class. So they're doing this equity work. They're reading about SEL, and they're starting to reflect on themselves to see like what it is that I need to work on as an adult in order to engage in this work fully to give the students what we need. Windsor is a very diverse community. Right now, our students, about 70% of our students are students of color. Black and Latino are the two biggest portions of that student of color population. So, and we're a solidly middle-class suburban community in Connecticut. So it's kind of an anomaly in a lot of ways, but it still doesn't mean that we don't deal with the same issues around race, right? We have plenty of people here in the community who would like to see Windsor, the first town in Connecticut, to go back to looking like the first town in Connecticut and not dealing with this stuff. They can just push this stuff to the side. That would make them happy. But folks live here. They own homes here. We don't have a public housing. We don't have any of that. But people come here and purchase homes for the most part. We do have people who rent. And we need to consider all the cultural aspects of those students and those families that come. So I'm pushing the staff to, as they learn this equity work, it's deeper than being nice to kids of color, right? I'm not looking for dashiki day. I'm not looking for, Mexican moment. I'm looking for you to understand that these students come from various backgrounds. Their families come from various places. They have traditions. They have cultural norms that you need to learn and you need to incorporate in your school, not as events, but it should be in the lessons. We've already even begun the work of changing the books that students are required to read in our school, right? And I'm a proud administrator and proud of the fact that this all occurred because of students. So a group of students came forward saying, hey, we want to read more books by authors of color. Why are we only reading these books? So they put together their presentation, and their list, and they went to the board before COVID hit, right? I know the board was a little stunned, but these students pushed for that. And I appreciate that they've done that, and they continue to push to see things change for them as students so that their experience can be different in the school, even different from when you went, Brandon, even more so. And so I want to be, as the leader of the district, I want to be that main support and that lever. Let me take the fire from everyone else, but I'm going to ensure that my students and my staff get what they need so this work can really move forward in a.
Absolutely. That's just beautiful to hear, and love the work that is being highlighted in both districts. So it moves me to my next question as we think through some of this work, and then I want to get to some individual questions for each of you. Is when we're talking about this adult piece. How do you support adults social emotionally in your district? And Dr. Hill, you can start.
So what you have to do, the same thing I think with young people, and this is a word that I think we kind of throw around society too easily, but I love it. And, Brandon, you work next to me and gone to school next to me, so you know if I'm telling the truth. It's about relationships, right? So you have got to sit down and talk to folks. So I do what's called straight talks in my district. It's been primarily, since last fall, it's been primarily focused on sharing information in a readily available way through a Zoom with my entire district around COVID. Different strategies, changes, protocols. And now that we're moving beyond that and everyone's been vaccinated and have both shots, I'm going to use that tool moving forward continuously to get information out. Like, I need to know what it is that you need from me as a superintendent, right? I'm talking to teachers when I go through schools, and I'm physically going in the buildings. I want to know. I'm not sitting there in a room looking for complaints. I'm going through classrooms so I can, one, see instruction in action, because that gives me my high. I still need that. But two, because I want to speak to teachers individually. Because people in a group speak one way, but individually they speak another way. But when all those individual meetings will give you a collective picture of what people are looking for. And I also talk to my leaders. We meet weekly. So I need to know when I ask questions, I think my leaders know that I'm not one of those, I'm just going to be plain BS people. I'm going to ask you a question, Do you understand me? Do you need something? Tell me, give me a call. I need to know. And I'm asking this because I need to know how to make certain decisions, what resources folks are going to need. I know my teachers are going to be just as nervous as my students in so many areas, right? And when we talk about traumatized, it's not like just students were traumatized. Remember, teachers and the other employees, they have families, they have their own health. We've had some people pass away in the district, so this has been traumatizing to everyone. And so I can't expect my teachers and my staff to give the best to students, right? If I haven't addressed what their needs are first, I have to take care of them so they can take care of the students. So it is not like a if then, but it's more of a and to. So I have to make sure I'm taking care of them continuously while they're taking care of my students. That's how I see that work.
I love that. That was, I mean, you dropped so many gems there. I hope that everybody that's listening is taking some notes in terms of some steps that you take to support your teachers within your district. Kamar, can you tell us about how that's taking place in District 13?
Yeah. So the first adult that I think I have to take care of is myself, right? So a part of this is being able to model what it is to be a socio to like live SEL. And so I really take passion in my own self-awareness in my reflection, and really I try to model that for my leaders first and foremost. Try to, I something I don't do that well at is like the kind of self-care that I need sometimes in terms of being mindful and like, just to take care of myself. And so I need to, and so one of the things that we've done as a not just as a district, but as a BCO, is to build in mindfulness practices. And we have a cohort of mindful, what we call teachers that are involved in mindfulness practice. They themselves are practicing yoga to bring to their staff, to make sure that as they have meetings, as they are going through the day, they themselves can manage their own triggers. They can really be live out the vision of some of our SEL work, which really is about us not building relationships and being able to manage our own feelings and manage our own trauma that we've experienced. Because for us in our district, the first teacher who passed away in one of our schools, and so in first teacher in New York City was a district 13 teacher, and what we went through as a city was incredibly traumatic for all of us. I think also we had a parent who had committed suicide with her child, and so we've had like really really deep. And this happened, actually, the teacher and the parent happened in the same school, right? And so how are we helping that staff? How are we helping that principal? Fortunately, this principal is like huge. She's like a master yoga person, and like she's been really helping the staff to kind of to heal, right? And so the question is, how do we heal as a district? How do we heal as a city? And the first thing we're thinking about going into next year is, how do we structure experiences for adults to start being in the same space together again, right? People who haven't been together in the same space for a while. How do we our Summer Rising initiative is heavily focused on enrichment activities for students, right? Because as students come in and staff come in, we don't want them to feel that pressure of, oh, you need to get to this this work or that work. We want them to be really centered around, how do we come together as a team? How do we team build? How do we actually recognize each other as human beings first, and that we've been through a lot together, and how do we take that and move forward? So there's a whole host of professional learning activities for that the borough has, that our schools can tap into around that.
Wonderful, wonderful, powerful work being done in Brooklyn and Windsor. And so I want to come to you, Mr. Samuels, in terms of the work that you're doing around anti-racism. So we know that District 13 is placing anti-racism at the core of its work. How is your work with SEL aligned with your vision for anti-racism?
Yeah, I started to answer some of that earlier, actually, but So I think when we think about what schools are and what schools represent to our neighborhoods and our families now, and when we think about the double pandemic that we've experienced, right? Like not just with COVID, but with the emergence of the need, the explicit need for everyone around our work with social justice. We now know that if we don't do anything, if we just do what we did before, we will have significant and entrenched and stubborn disparities that won't go anywhere, right? And so everything that we do has to be done with a lens of anti-racism if we intend to ever change the outcomes that we have. And SEL is no different in that regard. Because if we don't do it in a holistic way that informs practice around with anti-racism, then we will continue to have the disparate outcomes around suspension, or we will have teachers bringing their implicit biases into these conversations that end up being more of how do I control Black bodies than how do I unleash the potential within all of our kids, right? And so for me, that is what SEL is about. SEL is about how do we acknowledge and really pay serious attention to what folks have called the soft skills or whatever, or they come up with all kinds of things, but really it's the skills that ensure that a Black immigrant male like myself can navigate the world in a way that will make sure that I am leading to a life that is a happy life, right? That is a life that is full and rich and that has significant options, right? And so I think that is not, SEL is not colorblind, like nothing is colorblind. And so we have to be able to acknowledge that if there are behaviors that the society expects from a group of people, when you are taking SEL into the classroom, you will inevitably have that mindset, right? Because that is so prevalent in our society that something has to be done to actually disrupt that. Something has to be done to disrupt the notion that I really need to control this child, right? Something has to be done to disrupt that I am pouring in something that this child needs to know. But what we need to do is to be able to unleash the potential that's already there. They come to us as whole human beings, and how we acknowledge that and move them forward is that's what we need to do as practitioners.
I love that. I'm excited that work is happening within District 13. You're leading that. I love, unlock the potential, not to control, right? And just seeing the human side of every single child is exactly what the focus needs to be.
And you all are helping us to do that, Brandon. You all are helping us to do that. I appreciate that.
That we are brothers in the work, and so Dr. Hill, I want to come over to you with a specific question. You have your dissertation. What did your dissertation on the career paths of Black and white superintendents show about the importance of social emotional learning?
It's a great question. So. And looking at that, so let me just quickly tell people why I decided to go that way, is because as I continue to move in my career, and I'm sure, Kumar has seen it himself, right? It's, you start moving up. So you teach, see a few of us, you move to administration, it starts to thin out a little bit, building principal, as you move up, it's a tight triangle, very tight and very steep. And, as I was now looking at central office, I'm looking around, I never see myself. Every time I'm going to a conference, I never see myself, right? And yes, I was raised by a strong Black woman from Brownsville, Brooklyn, but I'm still a human being. And no human being wants to be anywhere where they don't feel comfortable or safe, right? And it's I don't need to see everybody Black, but I want to see myself sometime. And I think we all have been in situations where we looked around a room or a space and you be like, Yes, there's one person, right? Because you want that kindred experience, you want a connection, and then you can expand out. So, in looking at that, I saw that we weren't moving in those spaces, and so it was twofold. Not only were we not moving in those spaces, so you wouldn't find that level of comfort as a professional, but then also I'm looking at the decisions being made, right? Everyone continually talks about all the changes that need to be made in education and what we need to do, but it's the same people. And I've always understood that I can't get change from the person who actually created the situation that we're in. And I'm like, I liked what Heather McGee said earlier. She talked about we're in this situation because of decisions that people make. So we need to make different decisions, right? And so I'm saying in my dissertation, how can we expect education to change, improve, or anything of significance if we continue to only believe that the best leaders and the only leaders are white males? That's pretty much what it comes down to. Everyone else, they may get through, but it's primarily white males. And so this work, when we're talking about SEL, when we're talking about equity work, right? I'm not saying no white males do this work, but again, let's be real. We look at the hiring patterns, and that's what I focus on in my dissertation. I didn't call people racist, because that's not going to get you anywhere. But I just called out patterns and practices. So you continue to hire one white superintendent after another, yet this district is not moving academically. You're still having the same social problems. You're still having the discipline disparities for kids of color that Kamar has mentioned a few times, right? So, but you seem to still think that white males are always going to be the best leader. And I'm like, clearly they're not. That doesn't mean they're the worst, but they're not the best in every scenario. And so what about the opportunities for folks of color, for more women to come into those roles? Maybe they have a different approach, an approach that could actually work better. And I don't mind saying that, as a person of color in a leadership role, so my ideas and my position and the way I posit my thoughts with my staff, as I said earlier, is I'm thinking of what it's like to be that person who's in the group that's not in power, who's not part of the dominant group. So now I'm the one that everyone looks to for the decisions. Don't get enamored with your power, but use your power to actually benefit other people. And I think that's really what we're doing with SEL work, is that you're giving students, because we're focusing on students, but it's also staff, but you're giving them permission to feel empowered within themselves. Like, you're a beautiful Black young lady. You're an incredible Latino male, right? Just two examples. I want you to just enjoy all of your gloriousness in your own race and ethnicity and gender. Enjoy yourself. And I'm going to help support you in all the things that I do in my classes and in the school system. You need a club. We're going to create a club that you want, that's going to help support you and help you feel better. No one learns in an uncomfortable environment. Adults don't. When adults are not comfortable, they check out immediately. However, we expect students to sit through misery for 12, 13 years at minimum, by law, and we never think that, they're a dropout. And you use Biggie, I laugh when you said that, right? I never amount to nothing. That's because often we put kids in a box. And if it's not the things that we've done, it's not from the checklist that we're used to checking off, then of course, it's not possible for you to be anything of significance because you're not going down this checklist. Well, what about a different checklist, right? And in our district, we have the mission and vision of, is developing the genius in every child. And I'm constantly fighting to ensure that we actually live up to that credo, because the genius in every child doesn't mean ensuring every child is a great math student or a great English student. Like, we have kids that are musically talented here in Windsor. You have kids that are artistically, the visual arts, right? You have kids with talent in athletics, all kinds of talent. So why are we limiting genius to one specific area, right? So I have to ensure that the argument and the discussion is always broadened so that we can ensure that we're truly tapping into the genius in all of these amazing young people, right? I don't know, I'm picking at Brandon, I'm sorry, I know you're the moderator. I don't know that Brandon in high school thought that he would be sitting in the positions that he has sat in, and he continues to sit in, and leading, globally, this young man from Windsor High School, the way he's leading. But obviously, he got someone tapped into his world, or someone's, multiple people, and he felt a level of comfort where he could then begin to explore the things that were truly part of his spirit, and he's sharing them with the rest of the world. And I think that we're blessed from having him reached that point of comfort where he wants to share his talents and gifts with the rest of the world. So, sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, Brandon. You know,
it's all good.
Oh, this came off the dome.
Yeah, no, again, I think everything that's being shared here and everything you said is spot on and right in line with our theme for today, and the work that we're going to be carrying out in our schools and districts. So the next question, this is for both of you, is how do you center? Just thinking about before, Dr. Hill, you talked about you had a board meeting earlier this week, and Kamar, you sit in a lot of different spaces, and not just representing District 13, but then all of like Brooklyn North, right? So how do you center SEL in your decision making? And Kamar, you can start.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm gonna go back to what I said before a little bit, which is like it starts with me, like and how I manage myself. One of the things I've learned to do in the pandemic is cut my own hair. I don't have that much to cut, but I have learned to cut my own hair, and but recently I had like an MBK, My Brother's Keeper event in my district, and it was like with all black males were on this call, and I immediately recognized a feeling I get when I go into a barber shop, right? It was like it just came back to me very profoundly, and I said, and so after the pandemic, I'll start going back to barber shops because I feel such a strong sense of belonging in a barbershop, right? And so that's really the core. And like I have such good relationships with my barber. It's more than just a technical thing of cutting my hair, right? And so I'm saying that to say that definitely want to recreate that sense of belonging to my students in a school. And so when I'm faced with decisions, I'm thinking about how will this impact my kids and my young people and their experience and how they experience school. And so when you talk about centering socio-emotional learning, SEL, in my own practice and in my own decision making, it's all about, for me, how I relate also to my leaders, how I relate to the central offices in DOE, because quite frankly, despite the fact that New York City is a very diverse place, we have some of the most segregated schools in the country, and that doesn't come because by accident. It doesn't come if we are going to disrupt that, it has to be through intentional work. And so when I'm faced with decisions, I have to ask myself, how much energy and courage is it going to take to actually move this piece, right? And quite frankly, in the context of where we are, this work takes a lot of courage, right? And so I have to center myself on what is the impact in terms of the student experience that's happening in my schools as a result of this particular decision, and what am I going to have to do to push on who I need to push on, whether it's or challenge who I need to challenge, whether it's people who are above me in the totem pole or people who I'm working together with, such as my principals and my and folks on my district team, because you're constantly having to make, and that's one of the reasons I think, throughout we talk about the castle framework a lot in our district, and I was saying we need to put courage there somewhere. We need to figure out like how does being courageous like land, because when you have all of those skills, if you don't necessarily have that piece of how do you push that work, you're gonna end up building a lot of relationships, but they're not necessarily in service of moving in the direction that you need to be moving.
Dr. Hill, do you want to share a little bit how you center SEL in your decision making?
Sure. Again, man, Mar, we definitely got to connect. I'm like listening to him, like, hey, I'm liking this, and clearly your folks love you as I'm reading that. So something that I've done my whole career, so 28 years in education, 19 as a school leader or administrator rather. I had a principal who was Brandon's principal at the time, Ms. Ford, and she said to me, when you go into class and observe a class, here's how I want you to evaluate that class. I don't care about the rubric in the, on the paper. I want you to look at that teacher and what that teacher's doing in that room. I want you to ask yourself, do I want one of my daughters? I have 3 daughters. Do I want one of my daughters in this classroom? So 2 of my daughters have graduated from Windsor High School as well, and my youngest is a freshman at Windsor High School. I have never lost that since 2002. I ask that same question. So, and I tell the teachers and the families that you get the benefit of me leading you because I want my daughter in these schools. I want her in these classrooms, which means if I want my child there and I want the best for my child, then that means your child who's there is going to get the best as well. I'm not looking for a segregated experience for Adia Hill. I'm looking for every student there to get the same experience that I want for Adia Hill. So every decision I make, and I am a veteran, I'm a soldier, not just saying it, an Army veteran, because people use those terms loosely, and I understand the battle. As the leader, the commander, I'm the one, again, who's got to take fire first. So I tell my staff and my leaders, you do what you have to do, and you do best by our kids and by our staff. Let me worry about fighting out front, whether it's the board members or in the community's going. But whatever fight I have to take, because I didn't take the job acting like one person. When I interviewed, I said, this is who I am. This is what you're going to get. You don't want me if you don't want this, because I'm not changing. That's just the way it is. And every day that I exist in this space, I'm looking out for my staff and my students, and they know it. When I go through the schools, as I'm meeting the young people, it's funny because they always say I look like the president. I think me and President Obama look alike. We'll leave that right there. But, that's okay. I'll be their president. And they're like, he's got to be somebody important. Look at him. He's in a suit. Little kids are amazing. But my little white children, right? My little Asian children, I'm looking at them as though they're my own children. And so when I go to speak to a leader or I go to speak to a teacher or a board member or somebody in the community, as I presented the budget last night to my community before our referendum coming up next week, I did the budget with my students and staff and the community in mind. I want to bring pain to the community because I know the pain that the COVID pandemic has brought people, physically, emotionally, as well as financially. So in my role as leader, I get to make certain decisions. Can we make decisions that are not going to bring financial pain, which can lead to more emotional pain to families? That's how we made our decision to present our budget. And they accepted it as I presented it. I was very happy about that because I'm thinking about other folks. So keeping other people at the center of your decisions, right? Understanding who you are, what you've experienced. For me, that's as a Black man, not wanting people to have that experience. That's how I make my decisions. And lastly, I'll tell anyone, I want students and staff to be just as comfortable every day in our district and in our schools as white people are in American society every single day. People might not like that comment, but they got a level of comfort that we all know they have. I want everybody to have that same level of comfort every single day.
I am here for that, and I completely agree with how you closed that there. So I have one last question, and then this will be the last question for our time together today. Is and I'm centering it back to you personally. How has your personal social emotional skill development supported your growth and journey as a leader? And Kamar, you can start.
Yeah, well, I feel like I always center myself. So this question in terms of like reflection is where I start at all the time, and personal responsibility. I think for me, it's the fact that when I was during my final year in college, I accepted a package at my house, and my door was kicked in by police officers, and I was arrested and charged with like 4 felonies, and I knew nothing about the situation. But when I was because the package had like 2 pounds of marijuana in it, but when I was in front of the judge said, one of the things that my lawyer said in my defense was that he was 20. My lawyer said he's a 20-year-old man. His mother is in court, and he's a senior in college, right? And it was the first time the judge had looked up from her paper to look me in the eye was when he said he was a senior in college, right? And I think from that day on, I first of all recognized, as an immigrant, like where I was situated in the society, like essentially what the society thought about me, and how immediately that could be taken away from me, right? Like my life, like I was in the my life didn't necessarily feel like it meant very much, except for the work and behaviors that I was able to exhibit as a Black man. But showing up by itself didn't mean anything, right? And so I've used that to propel me in a lot of ways, right? It's why I feel that, we talked a little bit earlier, Dr. Hill, about wearing a suit, right? It's one of the things that, like, as I leave my house every day, I feel it's important for me to put myself in a certain way. It shouldn't have to be, but it is. In terms of resilience and being able to push forward, I shouldn't have to be, but it is, right? I feel like I'm always having to push through and move through to prove to the world that I am that I am worthy in a society. Like, I'm worthy to my family, I'm worthy to my principals, I'm worthy to the people I know. In a lot of ways, I feel like I wish I could have a cape that said superintendent on it that I walk through the entire Manhattan with every day, because when people know I'm a superintendent, they treat me differently than when they don't. And so that the notion of how I think about myself has been profoundly impacted by the society I live in, coming from trauma and coming from a lot of different pieces that I have. So for me, being able to reflect, being able to really push myself around when I myself am living out some white supremacist tendencies, which black people do as well, and like pushing myself around those things to really challenge my own thinking and my own ideas when I do have racist ideas that are present in me and that are living out in the practices that I have to either implement or create. I feel like the notion of having the courage or the ability to look at a situation and think things through in a different kind of way, all stems down to all comes from like an SEL background. It has nothing to do with the academics that I learned in college. It has nothing to do with whether I know what vertical asymptotes are or whether I know the limits as x goes to infinity in math. Like, it doesn't matter. All of that doesn't matter. What mattered for me was my ability to now begin to navigate the world based on the things that I knew, and having a mother and family that kept me affirmed during all the things that I was experiencing. And so that to me is critical, being able to be resilient. You're muted, Brandon.
That was a powerful testimony to that question. We are at time, but I'm gonna give us two extra minutes, and I would love for Dr. Hill to answer that question, and then we'll close from there.
So I'm gonna just say everything Kamar said. So we'll make it quick, and we'll get to people's questions. The only other stuff that I'll add, Kamar, is that something that I've really become aware of through my research, my dissertation, is this thing called imposter syndrome. And so I have come to the conclusion I'm not no imposter. And so, when I'm quick to tell people, right, I had somebody say, something about, well, you didn't say this clearly. And I said, in a meeting, I said, no, I'm a pretty articulate Negro. And these clearly weren't Negroes I was talking to. And somebody wrote, he did not just say that. Yes, I did. because we got to get past the point where we keep questioning ourselves. And I feel the same way every day, leave my house with the suit, right? And it's like, nope, I'm not an imposter. I earned this. Got a PhD from a Research One university, and I wasn't the last one in my class by a long shot. I have earned every step that I've made thus far. And so now, since God has blessed me to be here, I'm going to ensure that I put the door stops on so other people can come walking through them doors. And I want them to move further and faster than me. And that's going to be my legacy. That's how I operate every day. I tell people, I don't care if you don't like me. I got enough friends. I ain't got to buy no more gifts. I'm going to make sure the people behind me got bigger and better opportunities. They're going to move further and faster. That's going to be my legacy. And that's the story I'm sticking with. And I tell people that all the time. And they're like, yo, he is unapologetically Black. Yes, I am.
That's right. Thank you, Dr. Hill. That's great.
I love it. I mean, that right there will bring us to a close for our time together, so that people can go to the next set of SEL showcases. So Kamar, Dr. Hill, thank you so much for your time today as we discussed how you are leading with SEL in mind. I hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference, and I'm looking forward to continuing and deepening the work with both of you in your respective districts. But have a wonderful Wednesday, and thank you again.